is the damage. The little cracks in your brain, apparently they store memory. If you're real smart, you got a lot of them. Something happens to you when you're young, especially really young. It's like being stabbed in the brain. And I didn't believe there was anywhere to go. I thought, I've had enough in the rest of the human race. I'm tired of not being believed.
Well, finally, the world has woken up and realized that there's sexual predators out there. They're actually finding out that sexual predators are priests, teachers, Boy Scout leaders.
Where's Michael? I can't get a hold of him.
Who wants to talk about Uncle Bob that's, molesting young boys?
People don't think that sheriff's deputies have been molested.
No.
Because we wouldn't mess with you.
This horrible, dirty, filthy, disgusting thing that nobody wants to think about or talk about is top of the news almost every day now. And I have to pinch myself because it took so long for the world to wake up.
When I was 14, I was sexually molested by my scoutmaster. And I managed to come up with a story to, convince my mother that I didn't need to be in Boy Scouts anymore.
Nick, will you remind me of what happened?
My dad, for years, sexually abused me.
Years?
Yes. One of the first things that I learned in my life was not to tell anybody anything.
I had a secret I swore I'd never tell. No matter how high I flew or far I fell, I told myself for a long time, this information is only mine.
Well, after a while, you get tired of running and hiding, and it's a degree of freedom in letting it all out.
I started sharing little bits and facts.
Understanding that you don't have to be ashamed, you don't have to be afraid that it happened.
To the surface, well, it began to creep.
When I was a little kid, I remember being in school and looking out for kids. I would say, is it happening to him or maybe it's happening to that kid? Because it was real easy for me to hide it.
Simply say we're through, 'cause I was so scared. If you knew you'd go, what will you do now that you know?
The innocence, really, of a parent lies in the fact that every parent feels when they look at their child, that's so beautiful. But abuse comes from where you least expect it. And honestly, I would say, maybe I'm only dreaming. Or maybe I was really having a nightmare, maybe. And I would protect this family with everything that I know. And yet I couldn't protect that one baby.
But it's been running circles.
Look at my family. I'm a perfect example. My family is a wonderful family. They love me, and they never had a clue. They didn't know well into my 20s that I was actually both abused and severely addicted. I hid it until it couldn't be hidden anymore. And then, of course, the whole world caved in. I couldn't deal with it. I disappeared for 9 years. I roamed the streets here, in and out of jail, in and out of rehabs. I wanted to die. I did not speak to my family. I didn't see them. I didn't talk to them on the phone. Nothing. Hey, first of all, can I get you something to drink?
I'd love some water.
Let me see. Go to some water. I'm not responsible for anything in this house. I don't even know how to work most of it. No. The TV, I don't know how to turn it on, and I don't know how to turn the pool cover off. I think everybody wants to tell the truth. You want people to know, and as long as you don't tell anyone how rotten and sleazy and dirty you really got. But the shame is so great, and no one's going to believe you. I'm an alcoholic, I'm a liar, I'm a manipulator, and you sort of reenact this self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, I'm the same piece of garbage that I was when I was younger, and I'd like to think that all this is never going to go away, that it never happened. I never did any drugs, that didn't hurt anybody else. Looking back on it, both with the drinking and the using and the sexual abuse, I'm a textbook case.
I think a lot of men carry a lot of shame as a result of being the victim of violence of different types. And sexual abuse, when it comes to sexual abuse, there's a whole nother level of shame, because if they were abused by other men in a homophobic culture, then you have the shame not only of being the victim of violence, you weren't able to protect yourself, therefore you're less than a man, because a real man supposedly can protect himself. This is all mythology, let's be clear, okay? This is mythology. But not only in the case of sexual abuse have you failed to protect yourself, it's been a sexual violation.
You wonder why no one tells. How many people are in this church suit? They're all kids, not one of them told. You're ashamed as hell. I swore to God I would never let anybody know. Never.
Can you tell me?
Yeah, it's okay. My friend, my best friend at the time, Scott. We had no place to go for the summer to swim, so we went to Palisade Park Municipality, where we went on a swim team, and Scott and I, geez, I don't even know how we met. I think that we were friends instantly, though. He was my best friend. I used to go over his house every day. And his uncle wasn't really an uncle, would be there, living there. He was a drunk, because I can remember smelling whiskey. And to this day, I don't like the smell. I don't like the smell at all. But, you know, he literally, the first thing he started when we would eat over, and he would take his foot, I'm certainly not going to do it to you, and he would, be getting us on the table with his foot, and I don't know why we were laughing at it, but we did. And we were all horsing around. I think we were really pretty easy pickings. And you go out to school every day to your best friend's house. His uncle's dead, but he was sexually abusive to both me and my friend. Of course, I never said anything. Not once I get to the block, I'll know the house. It's right before the turn right here. It's right before the overpass.
Well, I'll tell you right now that if I am going to fly back there, I'm going to find Scott. And I'm going to find that house.
Make a right. Oh, whoa, sorry, sir.
Can't make a right.
Oh, boy. That's the house.
I remember parts of it. I remember him raping me. Just, it'll come back, here and there. I'll be watching TV and it'll come in. I mean, it's just, it's like that. My earliest memory was I was 4. I was 4 years old. I was 4 years old, and I was 4 years old.
Who was it that abused you?
An uncle. This is an uncle. And I was real close to him, as a matter of fact. I kind of liked the guy too. He liked to play the guitar, and I used to hang around with him, and like normal kids, they like to be jumping around their older siblings, and so I was like that. So I guess I was real easy for him to get to. He took off, and then after that there was somebody else who did it to me too, till I was about 12, and that person my family doesn't know about. I have never told them.
They have a way of becoming your best friend, giving kids something that they would normally not get. Take us to the movie, let's go see this one. Your parents wouldn't let you see it. These porno magazines, I bet you've never seen those before, and of course we want to see those. And then don't tell anybody, otherwise, we can't do this anymore. Well, you're not going to tell anybody. And then just graduated to one thing to another. Take your shirt off, oh, you got an erection, they may move. And of course, the first sign of you saying you don't like this, that's when it's a very quick and sudden turn of personality comes out. They come from best friend to monster.
When I was telling my girlfriend about it, she asked me, why didn't you say anything? You're embarrassed, man. You're scared. One of the things that my uncle told me was, if you say anything, nothing's gonna happen to me. They're gonna beat you. They're gonna spank you because you're the one that's being bad, not me. And I completely believed him.
Most boys are taught to endure a tremendous amount of fear and pain without telling as a badge of masculinity. So to come forth and admit that you have been dominated by another human sexually is like the ultimate sign of being a victim and being weak.
And the Latino culture, you have to be a little hard. You have to be a little tough. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to hear a lot of don't cry, the girls cry, you don't cry, you're a man.
So if the parents are propagators of this male mystique, then they're feeding right into the little boy's fear to really be honest about what he's experiencing. It's about changing the culture.
By the time my other family member got to me, I said, you know what, no more. I grabbed the knife and I slept with it that night. And I said, if he comes to me, I'm gonna do him up. That's it for him.
I try to get men to stop talking about what happened to them. Because abuse doesn't happen to people, abuse is done to people. Sunrises happen. The change of seasons happens. You know, morning and night happens. Birth and death happen. Abuse is done to someone. It's a conscious, it's a volitional act of harm.
Put my little boy on his first school bus today. He beamed with pride while I felt compelled to say, be careful, son. Don't talk to anyone.
Well, I think there are different kinds of pedophiles. There are individuals who have never really learned to function adequately as adults, and they've twisted themselves up in knots. They're behaving in a way they don't really understand very well, and once they begin to understand the negative impact it can have on a child, are often mortified and remorseful and really desperate for treatment.
He molested you more than once. What do you think should happen to this man?
I think God's taking care of him. Yeah? I don't know, man. I think maybe getting him some help. Try that. Go down that road.
And I think there's another type of pedophile that's much more sociopathic, much more antisocial, who's really has no capacity to experience any kind of empathy or any kind of sympathy. And I think there is no remorse with those individuals. When I've come in contact with them in a clinical setting, they're people who are really trying to avoid jail, trying to figure out what they need to say to not do a lot of time. But with either individual, the crime is still the same. People still get hurt.
In my situation, in many situations here in this room, the molestation took the life from a child, and that child will never be the same.
Well, you know, like the man that you were talking about, he molested 50 boys. He shouldn't ever be let out. He should, you know, if it was up to me, I would say kill him. I think they should kill him.
Whether the stranger lives in your own home or up the street or down the road, how will we see, how will we know what has been done if we don't talk to anyone?
I speak to NYPD Special Victims Division has a training course on sexual assault, and agents come from all around the country and some from other countries. And I asked them, I said, who here has said to their kids, if anyone touches you, I'll kill them? And the hands go up. And I say, your kids will never tell you.
Pedophiles? Each one of them averages 117 victims in their lifetime. They're really hardcore ones. That's 117 boys and girls who will grow up to be dysfunctional. Times that by God knows what. This is public school number one. Certainly things I was doing, anybody would say there's something wrong with this kid. It ranged from the disgusting to the vulgar to the violent. And as long as I was being disruptive, that's about all that mattered. You know, it was in 4th grade. There was some obvious stuff, fighting, drawing like, you know, penis on the blackboard and pulling down the... It was our perverse way of saying, we know something you don't know. Teacher pulled it up, there it was. I used to love to pull that down, knowing full well that the teacher would eventually have to write on the blackboard and have to click it back up. And then there it is for the whole class to see. I didn't know that he knew it was me. I didn't know he called my parents in.
Glenn gave me the manual, the Book of Mischief, according to Glenn. I felt great privilege, but Glenn took it to an extreme. He might go into a class, by the end of high school, went into a class with a mask on and flashed the class. Those things that were, as a younger brother looking up to an older brother, let's say in high school, they seemed kind of heroic, became dysfunctional. And then it was just this immensely gut-wrenching concern that someone that I love is suffering, and that this is, something's under there. So this is not normal.
We're only learning the clues now. When this was happening to Glenn, you know, I speak to school teachers and they talk about, let's say, dyslexia in the 70s. They go, oh, we just started calling it that. You know, AIDS in the late 70s. You know, in retrospect, you can look back and you say, oh, well, that was very obvious, that symptom. But at the time, there was no such disease, child molestation. There was no such thing. You know, we grew up in a neighborhood where if someone invited you in for baked cookies, we just thought that it was for baked cookies.
Today, with child abuse, the reaction is very swift, and the action taken is very swift. Whereas years ago, you'd say, well, no, it didn't really happen. No, it'll pass.
I mean, we only learned about it fairly recently. And even at that, you know, it's referenced, it's, you know, it's only now. And we're in our 40s, and this happened to him when he was 10. And he's had to navigate so much more than the rest of us. Of course, it's caught up with him.
Picture a family being a mobile that many children have over their crib. And they hit the one piece, and all the pieces move in different directions. If a family can realize that anything that just touches the lives of one of our children, that it affects everyone.
I practice in New York City, you know, which is the largest city in the country, and virtually none of the men that I have treated, and I've treated really hundreds of men, was abused by a stranger. Almost all of them knew the person, whether it was someone they knew closely or someone more distant. It's not the proverbial man in the dirty raincoat who grabs a kid, and that we're also afraid of. And of course, there's reason to be afraid of people like that. But much more insidious is the guy that who's in a position of trust and whom you'd never think.
I'm Katie Couric. Tonight, the largest settlement ever in the clergy sex abuse scandal. The Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles will pay 2/3 of $1 billion.
With the $660 million settlement, I hope that I am no longer, and I hope that all my other fellow victims are no longer alleged victims.
The term molestation victim is not the right term. They think somebody came up and said, ooh, you know, no. Rape, oral copulation, sodomy, some really bad stuff. Well, you know, in my case, you're gonna have to check all the above. And, you know, I don't care if they give me a check for $10 or $10 million. You tell me where I can take that check and cash it in some place that makes me 10 years old again.
All you have to do is go to www.bishopaccountability.com. I mean, we're talking bishop accountability. You ain't got enough paper in your office to print out all the cases. I don't know what lawyers they have, who they got they're putting all these, mashing them all together. Shame on those fucking priests.
We thought the church would thank us and say, oh, thank you for reporting your abuser. But instead of thanking us and embracing us and this gift of truth to protect other kids, we were vilified.
How many childhoods are spent confused? How many trusting souls have been abused? How can it be another way? It seems so obvious today that there is no God. There is no God.
There's something wrong with religion, you know? Now, does that mean every single priest is a pedophile? No. Does that mean all the church is bad? No. But your organization housed a load of them.
Yesterday, Roger Mahoney offered a very disingenuous and hollow apology. And he is sorry. I believe he's sorry. But he's sorry he was caught covering up these crimes.
I was a 7-year-old boy when this began. The only way to hold my life together was to bury this abuse and the memories so that I could survive, so I could get through the day, so I could be a 7-year-old boy, go to baseball practice, try to do my homework, try to do well in school, those types of things.
So many lives in such despair, yet we remain faithful. With all we know of human history, how can there still be such a mystery?
I won't ever be able to, nor will I be willing to go into a Catholic church again, nor will I be able to have a relationship with God. And that's one of the many things they took from me.
There is no God here.
I've been close to a lot of victims of abuse, and the ones that are still have faith in God, I really try to sit down with them and try to say, hey, listen, you know, if we live just a decent life, you don't have to go out and be a hero. But I really think when time comes and my life is ended, I really think that when I get to purgatory, that St. Peter, there's going to be a line there, and there's people waiting in line, but I think there's going to be a special gate for victims, and St. Peter's going to be there, the door open, saying, come on in, just, you know, and kind of like, hey, sorry about that shit that happened, you know, just get in here, and you know what, and he's going to put his hand up for Carla Mahoney and these other guys.
Since 1950, sex abuse settlements have cost the Catholic Church in this country more than $2 billion.
One of the only good things that came out of the scandals in the Catholic Church is that the sexual victimization of boys now has entered the public consciousness.
And there are more to come. In the Diocese of San Diego, 150 cases of
And I think that really did encourage boys and men to come forward.
But he did say he's sorry he didn't do anything. He confronted my mother, and they didn't press charges. It was an uncle who did the abuse. Don't do anything, I'll have a talk with them. And my father thought that going through a legal process would bring up more trauma.
It's estimated that there's maybe 40 substantial groups in the world for males who have been sexually abused as children.
That was taking place.
4 of those viable groups are here in California, and we know that there's a couple of them in the UK, there's one in Australia, there's one in New Zealand, there's one in Canada. That means that there are less than 1 per state in the United States. Most people assume that we don't provide services for men.
There are men who come from as far away as Los Angeles to come to a group. We've had some from Santa Cruz, certainly San Luis Obispo, but throughout California, and they'll come here because they haven't been able to find a service like this anywhere else.
I always had a feeling growing up that I would die young, but I don't know, I didn't die.
As uncomfortable as it is, everyone in that group has something in common. And the power of hearing somebody else say it in a group, not be judged, does help. I didn't have to relive it, even though I told it. I got it out. You know, I didn't relive it. I didn't re-traumatize myself. I got it out, and then I got feedback from other people who are in fact abused. You don't talk about that. I talked about it 1,000,000 times with someone who was loaded. Who knows how many people thought, I gotta get away from this guy. He's telling me a fucked up story. I told about 150 strangers, people I didn't know and never was going to see again. If I was so drunk I could barely think, then I would tell. But then I would never see him again.
When Glenn was around 27, 28, one of his girlfriends at the time, who's since, she's a family friend, her name is Maggie, she was so close with him and he confided in her.
The first indicator was girlfriend saying, you know, Glenn's confided that something happened. Something happened. I can't tell you. It's so bad. It's so horrible, I can't tell you.
I did tell someone. Maggie, it was a girl I was seeing, and the pain became so great, and I thought, I better tell someone.
I wanted to talk to him first, obviously, just to kind of, and also to jog my memory, frankly, because it's been such a long time. It's a long time ago that we were hanging out. It's beautiful, honey. It's just beautiful. She's been wearing it. Like, I actually have a very clear memory of the first time I saw Glenn in acting class, doing a scene. And I remember looking at him, he was so beautiful. It was just incredible to look at. And fun, like he was fun. He played softball every Sunday. We would go and have coffee after the game, have, you know, food. But one night he called me, he'd been drinking and I don't know what else, because at that time I didn't know that he was doing drugs. Glenn called me late at night in a state of despair and just trying to say this thing, that something had happened to him and that he was, and I remember thinking, you know, it was convoluted and hard to follow, but that I was going to stick with it, because I remember having this thought, God, if I was in this state, I would hope that somebody would listen to me. He told me about it with his friend Scott and this guy named John, and after school and the whole thing, and then he swore me to secrecy. You know, he begged me not to tell anybody. And his brothers were really wanting to know what was going on, and I felt really conflicted. That was actually really difficult, because I swore I wouldn't tell. But then he was suicidal, and I was 22, and I didn't know what to say.
And then I tried to kill myself. But it didn't work. It was a half-assed attempt. But I still wanted to die, and then the consequences from that were throw him in a mental home. Which is, they didn't know what else to do. You know?
Who your family?
Yeah. You know, I cut my wrists, and I was so loaded and so confused.
I mean, a big part of telling this right now is a certain level of numbness for me, you know, a certain level of numbness, because we were young in this room, and there's such depth of knowledge of who we were.
Sure.
So most of the time you can't deal with the fact that he was dealing with everything that we were dealing with as kids, and the things that we loved and the things that we hated, but he was dealing with something that and somehow part of that trauma was the message that he could not share this. And, you know, that was the greatest joy of our lives, was to be there for each other through the good and the bad. So for the most part, you can't even get your head around it. You can't even imagine, because all the pranks and all the escapades, it's really just the threshold. It's like the entrance of it. It's what he allowed himself to put out in the world. So it's what he couldn't allow himself to put out in the world. 20 years.
I had dropped out of college, thought, you know what, I'm never going to be happy, I'm never going to be normal, and yet I still didn't. That happened when I was a kid, but I'm fine. So I met a wonderful woman, and we got married, and things were still becoming a little rocky. There was drinking involved. She thought I should stop. I didn't think I needed to. All the usual suspects that come up with this. Well, don't you think this had something to do with it? No, I'm fine. That happened when I was a kid. Oh, I'm fine. Leave it alone. So I went back to college, and in one of my classes there, a woman came and spoke about domestic violence. And one of the things she said was, those who can speak need to stand up and speak for those who can't. And I said, that's it, that's what I'm doing. What happened with me is I was to go to his house for tutoring in math. He was an award-winning teacher, but it was one day of math, and then it was touching after that. His abuse ended when he lured an 18-year-old man into his house, got him downstairs at gunpoint, sexually assaulted him, castrated him, took what he removed upstairs, ate what he removed, found him still alive downstairs, and shot him in the head. And so he was arrested the next morning. And I'll never forget seeing the article, and I thought, I don't have to worry about that anymore.
This is it right here. Hold on, slow down the car. You know, being in the same room with somebody, both sitting there like, powerless. You know, you're not big enough to do anything about it, really.
Glenn said that the boys they'd be on their back and he would put their legs up, you know, their knees by their ears. And then he said it'd be raped and it would be like being stabbed. I can't even imagine how painful that must have been.
And there's no way anyone's going to believe me and Scott. Trust me, we were both considered troublemakers and, you know, not believable. And then, you know, we started acting out. It's a terrible cycle.
One night he had gone to his mother because he was in pain, and I think he said, "My ass hurts." I think he used the word ass. There was no more vigilant mother in the world. But she couldn't, I would say she couldn't hear it. It's like saying, listen to your kid speak a language that you didn't even know existed. There is no, that doesn't exist, that children get abused by people they know. You know, to say that she had no idea that something like that was going on is some kind of understatement. She just thought he was using a dirty word and didn't like it and scolded him, which really made him retreat from the idea that he could even reach out to his parents and get any kind of help.
I had comfortably tucked away that, you know, me and him are, you know, very much, this never happened. We never spoke about it. Scott would every once in a while, I worried when he would get drunk. When he got drunk, he got, you know, you and me, we've been through everything. We're childhood friends, remember that. Like, he would start going there.
When there was an effort to stop it, there was threats. There was a story that took him back down to the park and killed a duckling. That this man killed a duckling and said, "This is what will happen to you if you speak about this." There were 3 survivors in Glenn's immediate story, in Glenn's immediate experience. Glenn was one of 3, and one of the peers committed suicide. And then Scott was a dear friend of ours. We swam together and played together, and he just basically couldn't keep it together.
I mean, Scott's suffering mentally. So Glenn is the lone survivor.
Scott, I don't know what to tell you about Scott. He's not okay. In fact, he became strange. I don't know what became of him. He's not okay.
And you said at one point in time that you both were in the same room at the same time when this was happening?
Lots of times, yeah. So
how long did it go on?
2 years. 2 years, and you know what? It wasn't for the fact that we got into trouble and I wasn't allowed to see him anymore. That stopped.
3 weeks before trial date, as part of the litigation process, both sides wanted a walkthrough with a video camera and a still camera of, for instance, my priest Hagenbeck, you know, where you parked the car, where he brought the boy in through the kitchen, up the stairs. In all these cases, you want to get notice, which is somebody knew that something was happening and didn't do anything about it. And it's part of the judge's order, so the archdiocese attorneys were there, my attorneys were there. You know, for legal reasons, you want to see like where his bedroom is. Did that bedroom walk, to get into that bedroom, did you have to walk by a supervisor, a housekeeper? So that obviously in trial we could say there's no way boys could have come up the stairs without another supervisor knowing. So we knocked on the door and the housekeeper opens the door and she lets us in and they start filming. We go upstairs, we're going to film Father Hagenbeck's room. Well, they knock on the door, and you know, there's an awkward silence for about a long time, well over a minute. Finally, the door unlatched and opens up, and I'm not saying a minor comes out, but about a 21-year-old boy comes out with the priest in shorts and a tank top in a locked room. And you know, after all of this, you know, churches finally admitted it was inappropriate 30 years ago for priests to have kids in his room, and now they've said it's inappropriate to have anybody in his room. But you know, here in 2007, my reaction was, oh, it's not a minor, but what is the priest doing? Oh, happy birthday, you're 18 today, come on up.
Dust on my shoes indicates to me the dreams that I dreamed were not meant to be. The tracks that I leave as I drag my heels, only the dust on my shoes.
I was embarrassed. I thought I had made a mistake somehow. It was my fault that this guy molested me. But I knew it was wrong immediately. I told my father, and it, you know, and it continued. And I swear, I thought to myself, if I could get away with it, I'd burn the fucking place down. I did. I really did. And my wife talked me out of it. I mean, I really, you know, you entertain thoughts like that, and you know, and you know what it means. You know, I'm a cop. I'm gonna get arrested for arson. Yeah, right. But they're so compelling. That's the counseling room where he molested me the most, and just outside of that, in the living room, is where it all started. I'm serving Mass, and I'm 8 years old, and Father McHugh says, "I want you to stand up and take your pants off," and I was just scared to death, and I knew, I can feel it now, it's that, you know, that kind of nauseating feeling, you know, this is wrong and this is bad. Guy had smoke-stained teeth, he had this typical alcoholic little belly and little skinny white legs, you know, and he was the most repellent person in the world. Anyway, and to have that guy crawling all over you, you know, just... And right down here at the end is where we would go in and change into our cassocks and surplices for Mass. And he would put money on the ground and have us bend over and pick it up without bending our knees, and we could keep it, and he'd come up behind us and hump us from behind. The door would shut, and then I knew. You know, I was a little kid. I didn't know what to do. This is God telling me to do this shit. I felt bad sometimes that I felt the way I did about what he was doing to me. Because I believed in God, and I'd look up at the crucifix, and I'd look at this great guy, you know, that took care of everybody. And my dad told me, I talked to Father McHugh, and he told me that he'd had a leg injury when he was a kid, and that he was just checking your legs. And that was that. You know, like, I still, this day, I asked my mom, is he really my father? Because I felt no connection, none. So he sent me back to go serve Mass with him. The first thing is they assume is that you're not telling the truth because they don't want to believe it. Nobody was, especially your priest back then. Now it's like every priest out in public, I feel sorry for him because they're immediately a pedophile because they were in the collar. But they knew full well what he was doing, and they were moving him from church to church to church. Do you know how many victims there are? And that's another message too, and why I'm doing this, is parents, listen to your kids. Listen to them.
Dust on my shoes indicates to me the dreams that I dreamed were not meant to be.
It's often very confusing for little kids that an adult they trusted would now hurt them in some way, and they don't know how to make sense of that, and they wonder, what did I do to make this person mad at me, or what did I do to deserve this kind of punishment or this kind of injury? They're little kids.
The guy fucking he steals your life. When you're young, your memories, those things that happen to you, they create who you are. That memory gets stabbed into your brain and you don't change. Alright. I don't quit speaking in front of my wife and my son. God forbid. We both kept him away from any, as you can see, he has not been touched by anything like this. And it's affecting me right now because I'm getting very angry. I'm just thinking about it. They wasted a lot of my time, and I'm getting very angry.
It affects their sense of being a man in the world, to have been a victim as a child. It didn't make sense to them as little kids, but it also doesn't make sense to them as adults.
Gosh, I live a normal fucking life. And no one seems to get a fucking hint.
Look, anger is a part of this whole process, and screaming is a part of this process, and being incredibly disappointed because we're dealing with something that in our culture, what happens is a lockdown of secrets.
A few beats of quiet, and I just step center. We restore to our general look. So have you spotted another special for the photo?
The act of telling is the act of putting light on it.
Okay.
Something that is tucked away and frozen.
I was just going to see, because that glare thing is always a bizarre thing.
It trickled out to my older sister maybe when I was in my mid-20s. Remember that camp counselor? It trickled out in little tiny ways until, and over the years it sort of peeled away until, lo and behold, I was publishing a book and a play about it.
No, so I say campfire time, but here's the actual cue. I raise my finger and go, campfire time.
You see, it's interesting. A play is always about something, but it's really always about something else. In this case, the narrative is about a boy who traveled through the story of sexual abuse and finding a path toward healing.
He walks in, and the show cue goes to full, which is 50.
But really, ultimately, what the play and the book are about is how something in your life can be both absolutely dark and light at once. An utter crime that you think ruined you, but then also give rise to the deepest lessons perhaps you're meant to learn.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
There is a myth, a fear in our culture, I think, that to have someone perpetrate sexual abuse on you when you're a young kid is to somehow then turn you into a gay person or turn you... And it's complete fallacy. It has nothing to do with that. My nature was as basically homosexual from the time I was really little. And if nothing else, I think all the writing I've done and the play that I've written in some ways was my own process of moving toward compassion. You know, I faced my abuser, this man who completely wronged me when I was a child, when I didn't have a brain to figure out what was going on. And here was this wizened old man in a wheelchair, and I thought, oh my God, he's beside the point.
It was when the bell rang, as usual, at 2:45, to release us.
Part of the crime is a scrambling of your identity. You're so freaked out by what happened that you don't know who you are. I mean, that's what I struggled through. We all have. Self-hatred. How did I let this happen when I was a little boy? You know, because I'm bad. No. Stuff happens on God's planet. And, you know, and now here you are, and you got to figure it out.
I was kind of given an ultimatum by my family. You know, you have a problem, and you need to do something about it. That's the reason why I went to Monterey in the first place.
See you too.
I had a child who I adored, and a wife who's wonderful, and I could not run.
Tell me, how are you doing? Tell me about yourself.
I'm a lot better now. I wasn't doing well for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, the family put me in a Brookhaven mental hospital. I wound up in a mental home. Part of it was my own behavior. I became so angry my behavior became bad.
You know, we thought, we better intervene here. And so we did. We called the cops. We called 911.
When the doorbell rang and I saw the police.
You know, it was Glenn Kulik here. And my brother answered the door. And he said, no. He's not here.
And I took the police to a very long romp. You know, I was shutting doors behind me and they were kicking them down. And I ran out of doors and room.
So he fought them tooth and nail. And that's why he has some cuts here and here. They had to keep him there.
I've got this whole rest of my life going on, and you got me in a mental home with these guys throwing feces against the wall. Mm-hmm. I'm very angry, you know. I'm playing bingo, you know.
People with bipolar disorder in a full-blown manic episode look like a trapped animal in a cage.
But I acted like a wild animal, too.
You acted like a wild animal.
I justified that part.
But we see a very similar thing when people have been sexually abused and nobody's listening to them.
Yeah, did Glenn instill fear in others? Did he behave in a way that instilled fear in others? Yes, he did. But I am in a place now where I understand the initial point of his pain back when he was 10, 11 years old. I see how it wreaked havoc on his life, the drinking, the addiction, how it affected my whole family.
Glenn would call and say, Mom, I fell asleep on the train. I'm in the Bronx on Jerome Avenue, and I'm in a phone booth, and you know, some unsavory character's down on the corner. You think you could come and pick me up? I got up. I got dressed. I get in the car. I did not know that Jerome Avenue in the Bronx was one of the biggest drug places in the world. Now it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And I go to the George Washington Bridge, and the toll taker, who God knows, well, they've seen it all, right? I say, in innocence, I need to go to Jerome Avenue. The woman looked at me. I'm sure she thought I was going for drugs. To this day, if I had to go to Jerome Avenue, I have no idea where I went that night. But anyway, I went where the lady said, and I made my turn. For the grace of God, really, there he was in that phone booth. I said, Glenn, honey, get in the car. Big kiss for his mommy. Me, I'm kissing him. And meanwhile, he was drunk. He was drugged. Who knows? I still couldn't quite tell. Okay, son, don't you worry. Do you know, on top of that, I actually asked him if he needed to eat something, and he said, oh, I'd love a bowl of pasta. And I cooked him pasta.
At that point, it was just Glenn and me in this room, and he started having really bad nightmares. I mean, he'd wake up shredding a mattress, punching, and the strength that it takes to rip a cover off a mattress and punch into the spring so that it cuts your hand, or flip off the bed and inadvertently pull a drawer over in his dream state, thinking that it was someone attacking him, and his punching through, you know, the wood frame and the drawers, and it was a routine.
Post-traumatic stress disorder refers to a constellation of symptoms that people experience after a traumatic event. It can be nightmares, even re-experiencing of the phenomena as though it were happening at the time, experiencing feelings of helplessness, of extreme fear, of horror.
You could not go in that bedroom and just tap Glenn on the shoulder and say, honey, good morning. Time to get up, or no. It was, no one will ever touch me again.
The guy destroyed my life, as far as I'm concerned, because I drank after that. I did harm to others. I did harm to my family. I wound up traumatizing my family beyond belief. I got shot in the head in 1997 after being in the street for like 8 years. Here. I got shot in the head. I carry the article with me in my little black bag in that room. I got shot in the head in Watts. And I do remember, I was thinking, this has got to be good for prescriptions for Vicodin for the rest of my life. Someone killed was shot in the head while attempting to retrieve. I get sad sometimes. I get hurt, but I feel like I'm a lot better off than most people. But I'm still a crazy alcoholic. And if I don't keep my program going, I go back.
Have you ever taken a drink again?
You know.
Did you have wine with dinner?
No.
Yeah.
I could. And I could possibly, nothing could happen. But 2 days later, I might say, you know, I had that glass of wine and nothing happened. So I'll have another glass of wine. And nothing will happen. So, maybe I'm not an alcoholic anymore. No. 2 weeks later, I'll be having a bottle. A month later, I'll be in it. Drunk, stinking, thinking crazy. Meet someone, hey, you want to start a business?
Addiction's really basically about trying to fix, like, fill this gigantic hole that people talk about inside, that like it's sort of a cavern that you can never fill up with enough stuff. So it doesn't matter how much food or sex or drugs that you put into the hole, it never gets filled.
And the degree at which people who are abused become substance abusers is super high. It's damn near 100%.
Afraid of what I'd find, afraid of what I'd see, afraid of what I'd learn.
Well, definitely everything is underreported. I think we're a very shame-based society, and most of the time we want to keep our secrets because we're afraid that we're the only ones that it happened to.
To me, it's all connected. Sexual abuse, the substance abuse, society's ignoring of the problem, the money that's spent on the problem. They say $500 billion. I've relapsed like 17 times, okay? I mean, I've been in 5 mental homes. They were trying to say my family I was in 6. I said, no, I wasn't.
Only 5.
I was only 5. But the thing is, we wind up on the street, we wind up drinking. I had 8 years of, what am I going to put on my resume? What? It's nothing. When someone sees that, they know that you've been put away.
Afraid that if I tried, if I really tried to fly, I might crash and burn.
You just get sick of it. And the biggest problem in my life was, and I cannot be honest with a person on a very, very, very deep, intimate level. And once I had a child, he pretty much, he's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Okay, all right.
Nick, N-I-C-K?
Yes.
Nick, can you please stand over here? A bit right here.
During that interview, I just kind of wasn't there sometimes. What happened was my dad, for years, sexually abused me.
Years?
It's really hard because I did have really good times with my dad, you know? He took me to Hollister Airport every weekend to see, there's old planes there, I just loved them. We'd go out like cruising here on South Main Street because he had custom cars, and we'd watch the cars go by, and if guys would stop and admire my dad's car. It was great.
Around at over 210 miles an hour, shotgun underneath a ribbon number 2.
Oftentimes, the victim of sexual abuse has a relationship with the perpetrator. It could be a person you like, even love. It could be a family member. It often is a family member. And so a lot of these young boys often have conflicted feelings because the positive feelings sometimes even linger beyond the effects of the abuse. So it's very complicated. And I think the way that some boys and some men respond to that complexity is to just not want to deal with it. And then, of course, it comes out in other ways.
I started a lot of this stuff when I was 6. I started like cutting my arm when I was 6 for many years, so I didn't feel. I would go and sniff airplane glue because it's really good for not feeling anything. Food became comfort, and so I started eating a lot, and I just stayed on the couch, and the most exercise we would get would be coming to the bathroom or going to change channel out of the fridge. I was around 600 pounds. I was unweighable. I did speed. The speed made it to where I could almost function.
These little kids, they're being lied to, because abusing a child is lying to a kid about the nature of love, caring, protection, relationships, sex, everything. They manage somehow to get through it. They come up with creative strategies. Sometimes these strategies turn into problems, running away or drinking or drugging. But when the kid first thinks of it, It's a survival strategy for somebody who has limited resources.
Yeah, I met my wife in the last rehab I wound in. She was the best counselor at one of the best rehabilitation centers, the treatment centers in the state. This is Cry Help.
He had a lot of issues that surrounded the abuse that happened to him, the anger that's involved, the fear, the abandonment, the grief.
How's the baby and Karina?
Wonderful.
And like many people who have gone through the throes of addiction and sexual abuse, his relationship with his family was strained. I knew that there was a lot of love there and concern, as there is with most people, but there was something special about his family. They never gave up on him, but they took a hard stand with him. You know, Glenn completed his time at Cry Help, met a woman who worked there. They eventually got married and had a child.
She put me in biofeedback. They weren't going to take me in biofeedback. They said I wasn't capable. Push a button on my phone.
No.
What was it that he said? It was the lowest score ever.
That you would need longer therapy than might be available to you, so they didn't want to start something that we couldn't follow through on. Didn't even like register on the scale.
Test again, and guess what?
It's a test where you just have to like respond when you hear a beep, you know, like respond to it in Glenn and be like.
They tricked me. They wanted me to stay. They got me to want to stay here. I had a crush on Karina. That helped. Although she didn't know who I was for the first 2 months. She actually thought I was mentally ill. They complained about me and thought I was weird because I was hanging over their bed.
In Glenn's case, I think that his first thought is not to trust the people that are around him. He's been given a lot of reasons not to trust people. He's been betrayed.
They won't let you pass that bill.
Absolutely not.
I remember seeing him the first time. I was a client at Cry Help. I had self-admitted myself for an addiction to cocaine. Most of the alcoholics and or addicts I have met are dealing with a trauma that they're trying to medicate. In my case, I had a similar childhood trauma that I didn't deal with. The way my mother died, a guilt, a suicide attempt, and I think that's why we've become such good friends. But he's a fighter. He doesn't give up.
I don't have an email about that.
You just got here, so you're not going to get an email. I don't see a computer. I don't got a back.
He was someone who was on the streets 7 years ago, beaten and dejected and almost kicked to the curb, as they say.
I hadn't been that clean my whole life. I hadn't had more than 88 days in 20 years. So I didn't even know what the hell reality was.
Let's go back to our breaking news story that we had at the top for you now. The tigers on the loose at San Francisco Zoo. One of them has been shot.
I wonder how many others turn to a substance instead of therapy. I certainly did. It was primarily alcohol, which got progressively worse and worse. And sometimes, you know, I still slip back into that feeling of I need to be numbed.
A lot of the use of drugs, alcohol, sex, and so on is to blunt it either with a drug that knocks your feelings down or heightens it so much that you're completely in some sort of moment, but not in the past.
I mean, it took me 35 years to open a yearbook from my sophomore year where the guy who molested me had written an end-of-the-year inscription.
Trauma at an early age actually causes changes in the brain. The hippocampus, a part of the brain that has to do with regulation and memory, is apparently smaller in children who were abused, suffered trauma. It's also true of war veterans. And it's particularly true with men that they don't often come to the realization or the actual memory until their mid-30s. It's usually at a time when their career is fairly well established, when they have a family, you know, they're more secure in their place in life, and somehow their brain is ready to let them remember.
You know, he said, this year has been a very happy and fulfilling one. He was older than me. I don't know if he was legally an adult in the eyes of the law, but he was definitely using his position as an older student. He used to call me little buddy. There are still things about it that just creep me out.
I knew something had happened to him because there was so much anger inside him and depression. And I mean, for years I talked to his family. I said, something happened. And nobody knew. For me, it's hard. It's really hard to separate the survivor who's gone from what he's done, the man I've been married to for 22 years. It's kind of like, come on, you know, I've really tried to help. And I mean, there are times I've been very, very angry at him. I mean, I feel horrible about what's happened to him. But of course, before I knew what this was all, I was so frustrated because our whole family was being destroyed. And to me, it was like, do something because you're losing all of us.
You know, I was in therapy for years, but never dealing with what really happened. I was dealing with, oh, the marriage isn't right. But I would never, every time I get close to maybe getting back there to what it was, I would stop going. I just wouldn't go.
And here's this man who could have been wonderful in so many ways, and it's taken a lot. And destroyed his kids and me and everybody who loved him.
And I don't see my kids because we are separated and going through a divorce. And I know it affected that. In addition to the marriage. And I just hope it's not too late for me to repair myself and then repair the relationships with my kid.
You know, I mean, there's evil. I just believe there's evil. And I'm sure this man has hurt other people.
It's these people abuse and they don't care. Bottom line is, he's going to get other guys, other boys, and they're going to have a little life like this. They're going to wind up with the house full with fucking papers. This is all about retribution for me. It's all about not being victimized. I'm writing a book. This is the files that are going to go after my manic collection of articles. Oh, this is the beautiful one here. Republican sex scandals dwarf those of Democrats. But I've actually learned to organize a little bit better. Folders of information that literally are so many pages. I've forgotten how much stuff I collected. Okay, it's just like NAMBLA. I have thousands of articles on NAMBLA. NAMBLA is the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And it is literally an organized group of pedophiles. I'm hell-bent on destroying them in my own mind. I don't know how they can exist. NAMBLA and all those groups. The North American Man-Boy Love Association.
NAMBLA has been in existence long before I became an FBI agent 20 years ago. I remember doing cases where we infiltrated NAMBLA and went to meetings and so forth, and we were able to rescue some kids that were being bought and sold through that organization. But basically, they became a very strong presence at the beginning of the Internet.
The Internet is so dangerous because it's faceless. It's cyberspace. Someone can pretend they're young and they're not.
The Internet changed everything with child sexual victimization, from child pornography access to victim access. The Internet put these offenders right in your living room. Every time we let our children get on the Internet, we're letting in hundreds, if not thousands, of sex offenders who are online every day.
A Monterey County judge ruled today that James Lamb, a Spreckles man who admitted to charges of child molestation.
For the past 9 years, Lamb had been taking part in a violent sexual predator program at Atascadero.
Lamb admits he may never be cured, but he says he can be trusted to suppress
People versus James Lamb. I prosecuted him for molesting a series of boys, and when a parole officer searched his residence, he found child porn. He had downloaded a lot of things from NAMBLA. In his writings, he had depicted himself as more fully evolved than we are. And he understands that when a child is born, a child wants sex, raw sex. And that's the guiding principle of NAMBLA. Mr. Lamb did testify at his first jury trial that he wasn't a child molester, he was a homosexual. And I just hope that the people on the jury would realize what a cowardly, gross, terribly disgusting thing that would be to try to draw some connection which doesn't exist, according to all research, between homosexuality and child molesting. There's none, and the jury didn't buy it, fortunately.
Perhaps the most damaging myth about male sexual victimization is what we call the vampire syndrome. If you're a boy and you're bit, you will grow up to become a vampire. The executive director of the Women's Crisis Center was interviewed about this, and she said once a boy is molested, he will grow up to molest other children. He will become a child molester.
All right, son. You're gonna have to let me talk with Steve and Terry for a little bit, please. I have to show them a couple things. This was the work I was telling you about, okay?
While it is true that most male sexual predators were themselves either sexually or physically abused as boys, it is also true that the overwhelming majority of boys who are sexually abused never go on to become predators. And yet, because this myth exists, they are afraid, often correctly, that if they disclose that they were abused, others will think that they are sexual abusers. And so another reason to never disclose, to remain silent.
So Max, where do you want to go on our way?
Just because a child suffered abuse, it doesn't determine what type of adult they are. People from all walks of life, from the sheriff's deputy to the electrician to the boxer to the scholar to the gay man, have this thing inside of them that they haven't been able to talk about.
I would like the headlines to read, "Perpetrators beware, local heroes support and protect young boys and girls." Local heroes, perpetrators beware.
It's like Vietnam vets coming back. You know, if you dare took the risk to say, I've survived this abuse, it's like being spit on to say, well then, you're damaged and you might turn around and become a predator.
Hold on, Max, you can help me. And I got to air up the tires in your bike.
Tires in my bike?
I have a very bad temper. I yell and slam doors and get angry over the most insignificant little things.
You know, I mean, he'd be driving down the road and he'd get mad at somebody for not using their blinker. So, literally, I went to the internet, I Googled the symptoms, and it talked about depression, and I started digging a little bit more, and it talked about sexual abuse.
Then where's my bike?
You're using this one, remember?
And I approached him, and I said, you know, let's talk about this a little bit. And then he opened up to me, yes, I was sexually abused, light bulb went on.
I never knew my father. He went to prison shortly after I was born. Mother was an alcoholic, and then when I was about 2, all of us kids were taken away from my mom for neglect, and I was put into foster care. When I was 10 or 11, I was placed with a single parent, and over about a 2-year period, I was molested repeatedly.
I think that Eric never really addressed it until now. I think that, you know, it's just one of those things that was horrible, and you just kind of push it back and you say, I don't want to think about it. You know, something bad happens to you, you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to think about it. I think that's pretty natural. Then there's people that suppress it and don't even know that it happened to them.
I'm coming to understand that because of the lack of control that I had as a kid, I'm trying to exercise as an adult. But I've swung all the way over to the manic side of anger, and it, you know, that's the reason that I, you know, I go to group.
8 or 9 years old, I was placed with a single foster parent, a man who turned out to be a pedophile.
The way that the abuse took place was in the form of affection, and so I was really confused as a kid.
I didn't know what affection or love or caring were.
I mean, a grown man in his 30s manipulating, you know, a 10 or 11-year-old boy. It's twisted and aberrated, but it's affection, and it's stable.
Here comes this person who has power and control and comfort.
It's hard as an adult to be a parent and think, you know, nobody did anything. Even after everything, all the signs, all the red flags, nobody did anything. And that's the part that just, it boggles my mind.
There it is. Pay attention. It's like, I think I told you about the kid who was making pipe bombs in his room. I'm talking to the mom in their living room, and I had no idea this was going on. I go, come on, let's go walk in the bedroom. Oh, there's, you know, metal filings, hacksaw, links of pipe, gunpowder, fuses. I go, well, what part of this mystery did you miss? And it's just that. We don't pay attention. We don't ask questions. We don't listen, or we don't want to hear.
We really have to listen, and the more outrageous it sounds, maybe the more likely, because child molesters are known to be huge risk takers. You know, and you can't simply shut your child down and say that, no, that didn't happen.
Is this the Special Victims Division, and they only investigate child abuse cases?
These cases are either referred from patrol, or the hospitals will call us, or schools will call us. So they come from many different directions. And myself, my detectives, we're all here to basically coordinate the efforts.
Let me switch you over, okay?
We had a little boy complain that something had happened at a daycare center, but he was 4 years old. And 4-year-olds are very, very difficult witnesses, as you can imagine. And so he had made a statement, and the detective called up here and said, well, what do I do? And I said, well, why don't you bring her in, perpetrator happened to be a female, and see what she says. And no one, I don't think, was more surprised than that detective when she disclosed what she had done to this little boy in the bathroom of the daycare center.
But apparently she believed that nobody would believe that a woman could do this to a little 4-year-old boy, a teacher's aide for all, you know. And so she decided to roll the dice and go to trial, so this little boy had to testify. And so the jury convicted, and she was sentenced to, I think it was close to 20 years.
I think so.
It used to be that a child who was sexually abused would end up speaking with as many as 12 different individuals. And some of those conversations would take place in a darkened office or in a police squad room or places like that.
If a kid is ready to talk about what happened to them.
And now they're in a child-friendly atmosphere. There is one prosecutor who knows and understands the problem, and everybody else is behind a two-way mirror.
And the little ones sometimes will run up to the mirror and they'll peer through, and if you look real hard, you can sort of see outlines of people, and they're like totally amazed by that.
And instead of being interviewed 10 or 20 times by all different people in all different places, they can be interviewed once here by all the members of a multidisciplinary team.
The statute of limitation is the amount of time that you have to prosecute a crime. And in California, for most sex crimes, it's 10 years. So 10 years after the rape has occurred and no one has been prosecuted, then it's too late. And we know that usually a person who rapes doesn't stop with one human being, that it's lots of people. But once you get past that 10 years, they can walk away. They can just walk away, and they know that. So that's what we're trying to change. And now, with the new bill, which is SB 256, I am trying to completely remove the statute of limitation and say, at whatever point in your life, and at that point you want to come forward, we ought to be able to prosecute.
The fact that there is a statute of limitations is horseshit, because I didn't remember a lot of this until 35 years later. That's him right there. See, part of the problem is I know where this guy is. He's a cop who deals with kids. He's in charge of the youth group at this church.
Pedophiles put themselves into positions that people would trust them. Teachers and coaches, priests, in fact maybe even a police officer that people trust, and all of a sudden that trust is broken and people have a tendency to...
He hasn't gone after him yet, but I said I want an hour. I said I want an hour with him.
I imagine it's like anybody else who's ever been abused in any way, shape, or form. If you get beat up in the schoolyard, I guess your biggest fantasy is being able to go back and beat the crap out of the bully.
I found him. I know his address. I know where he lives. He's actually a successful man. He's a published author.
He's actually in Las Vegas now.
I don't know if he's ready yet. And I don't know what can be done. Because it's been so long, like, can you press charges at this point?
I want my pound of flesh, so to speak.
If you want to report that you were molested years ago, contact the police agency that serves that jurisdiction where the molester lives. You ask for the child sexual assault investigator, and you ask if you can make a report that's anonymous, And they do, at least in California, have a penal code section that protects the confidentiality of any sexual assault victim. If that state doesn't have that, make it perfectly clear that you're concerned that there may be new victims, there may be victims even now, and that if they have an ongoing investigation, you want to be available to help them.
To be completely honest, if I was a single man, I probably would have done something violent. Yeah, I want revenge. I want to see him punished. But I look at my life that I have now. I'm married. I have 2 children. I have a steady job. I don't want to put all that on the line for somebody that's already taken so much from me.
I'm hanging this up, putting it down. So sick of dragging this heartache around. When it turns out I blame the wrong man all along, punishing myself for what you did wrong. And what you did, man, left a permanent scar. Oh, you know it left a mark on me. But I've dug deep and many times I've fallen hard. Somehow recovered remarkably. It's over and done.
Sexual assault programs here in California and across the nation are seeing less resources than ever before. Most states are scared of sex and scared of sexual assault. And so while rage about sex offenses has never been higher, public support for sexual assault victims really has never been lower. Almost anything we do around sexual offenders, I can talk to reporters and media, we can get reports out, we can get attention, we can get meetings with leaders, but victims' issues don't get the same thing.
Now you can keep the shadows, the secrets, and the doubts. I know you know what I'm talking about. It's over and I'm out.
Holding somebody accountable is not everything. You have to work on behalf of victims as well, and you have to link those issues together. All of these things happen in concert, or we will fail.
It's over and I'm out.
People who come to the Rape Crisis Center tend to be more females, and we know that's true across the state and across the nation. It's easier for women to reach out for help, but people don't feel safe coming out to talk about it still. I mean, I've seen a lot of changes in the 20 years. But it's still something that people are not willing to share. And yet we know it's not their fault, and that's a big part of what we do. Our message is it's not your fault, it's never your fault, it was never your fault. And so let's deal with how it's impacted your life now.
While there's no word, there's no deed, there's no way to retrieve what was stolen from me. But the sun continues to rise, the moon still pulls the tides so naturally.
Okay, so all of you have been in the group at some point, so you know.
The reality of being in that room with all those other guys was all at once a big relief, because I felt like this was going to be a place where I could probably get this out. At the same time, it scared me to death, because the reality was I had to be in a class with other sexual abuse victims. I didn't want to be.
Go into withdrawal.
I didn't want to admit it.
There's a point there. The drug stopped working, and you still have the pain.
But group works. I knew from the moment I got there. I knew because I got sick and couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to choke to death. I really thought I was going to choke to death.
Once they do decide to talk to a therapist, what they typically will do is they'll come to group, they'll want to tell everybody what happened to them, they'll avoid the details. As a therapist, one of our challenges is to get them to talk about the details, because a lot of healing can happen when they discuss that.
And then when I was 11 or 12, 6th grade, I spent the night at a friend's house, and a friend's uncle molested me throughout the night.
But the neglect from my mother, I think, is what set me up, because in a sense I have all of my life been looking for what I didn't get from my
I had this bad feeling, you know, I tried to get away, but he held on to me, you know, and then he started, you know, like fondling me.
And that led me to, you know, further addiction and further alcohol abuse, to the point where that was out of control, the alcohol abuse. And
when I was 6 years old, he would start caressing me, and I remember just freezing.
And this is a big step forward for you to decide to speak publicly about this. What led to that? What made the difference?
Just to prevent this from happening to others.
They build trust with each other, and they come out and tell their truths. And so rarely have they felt free to do that out in the world. And one of the things everyone who's running groups notices is that when they start feeling okay about themselves, they start telling their families about what happened. They start telling their friends, their wives. They no longer are keeping it as a shameful secret. And the first place they can do that is in a group of other guys who had the same experience.
Life was awesome. I completed my first week at graduate school. I'm seeing a lady that she's really supportive of me. And I'm going to Chapman University. I'm getting my graduate degree in psychology, marriage and family therapist certification.
Just been hanging out with my girlfriend and going to the gym and getting up every morning at 5 and doing my road work and running.
I have this little thing I want to fight. I want to get in there and see what I can do with that.
My wife and I talked about it actually today, and I said, do you notice a change? And she's like, yeah, it's pretty significant.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he's seen other therapists before, but never addressed that particular issue. I think getting to the root of it really has made a difference.
In Glenn's case, his trauma with his childhood is something that he's dealt with, and he's used drugs and alcohol to escape the pain. But I've seen people who were isolators become givers. They become very, very vocal about their recovery because they feel so much better. They feel like, wow, I have a life now, and they want to share that. And Glenn gives more back than he keeps for himself. It's to a point where he's almost addicted to giving.
Chandler Lodge is a sober living home. This is a place where people are one step from the curb. They have nowhere to go.
I woke up under the bridge one day and I decided that was enough for me.
You would not wake up one day when your life was doing really well and say, you know what, come into Chandler. You wouldn't do that.
So Glenn is in this community and sees there's embezzlement, corruption. He really couldn't accept it. He wouldn't accept it. And Glenn doesn't have to go in and fix this problem.
Glenn is one of those guys that has the ability to be extremely successful when he puts his mind to it. Almost 100% of his time, endless hours of research and work to save Chandler Lodge Foundation.
The whole place was rotten, but I didn't know how rotten, and I didn't know who it was who was picking the pockets of the place.
He went after them single-handedly because a lot of people didn't believe him, and he really did clean it up.
This was just a junkyard with a dumpster and all that. There was wires hanging out. Obviously, I refused to be victimized again. There was no way I was going to relent.
The beauty of everyone speaking out is that it's not a lifetime sentence. Glenn is fighting for that too. He does not feel it should be a lifetime sentence when you've been betrayed like that. He was totally innocent. He did nothing wrong. Glenn and Scott did nothing wrong.
But I left Scott down there. I didn't tell anybody. I was separated from him. I knew what was going on. I didn't say anything. It had to be going on before I went down there, and it had to go on afterwards.
The guilt phenomenon is the survivor's guilt. I could have protected someone else. I could have saved someone else. Or how come I didn't do something more?
That's the house.
Whether you're dealing with the cancer patients, they have survivor's guilt. Holocaust survivors have survivor's guilt. Veterans from foreign wars, survivor's guilt. It's really this amazing phenomena that people who have been through trauma actually feel guilty, that they're the ones who made it.
Away, away.
But I remember the inside of the house back then was very 70s. And it's funny, we never went to the bedroom of the parents. We'd peek in there once in a while, and they had the very funky ceiling, mirrored ceiling, and the drapes around the bed, and the whole. It's like very hip set. They were like swinging 70s, and it was kind of cool. And she was really nice. They never We never had anything inappropriate from them.
And I think she cared enough about everyone that she would never want to harm anybody, so she would.
Was it her brother that lived there? Who was the uncle?
It was her brother.
As far as I know, a couple lives there, you know, like mid-age to older couple, yeah, lives there, but that's all about I know.
That's Scott. That is his house. That's his car. That guy just told me. I see him come and go all the time. This is Scott's car. Exhale. I don't know what he is. Look at it.
Exhale.
I was very shocked to see the house. It doesn't look like anyone's been in it for a long time. And Scott's probably breaking in and living in it. That's what I'm thinking. Because the door is broken in. There's signs, clear signs that someone's in it. He doesn't keep anything in the house. Everything he keeps is in the car. I know the signs of a home. I mean, I know. All those letters, did you see how many letters were in that car?
Wherever he is, he can't be good. I left him here. I didn't say anything. I didn't say a word. And I always knew, he always knew. We were friends still. My parents separated us, but we still got together.
And what does that do in here, though?
It makes me sick. It made me sick last night. And now I'm angry. He's not okay. I told you, he's not okay. He wasn't okay. I don't know what damage was. It was done a long time ago. I doubt it can be reversed. I get tired, you know what I'm saying? Maybe, this is work. Getting bills passed, getting people to pay attention. No one wants to hear it. This is going to keep me going. I'm going to keep going till I drop. There's no doubt in my mind. This just gave me a whole nother reason to get up in the morning for the next 5 years.
How to stay inside my skin and fully let the moment in.
And I see him come and go. He probably just comes and puts his stuff in those cars. Yeah, I can help him. Now I have the resources to help him. I have the ability to help him.
Should we leave a message on the car?
No, I don't want to go back. I'll find him.
Exhale. 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 Away. Away.
First saved voice message.
Hey, Terry, it's Glenn. I'm about to take off. I was thinking about something. Don't know why I didn't do it yesterday, but you may not have the time, or you may not know how to get there, but leaving a message on the windshield is a very good idea. You may not have a chance to do that, and I understand if you don't. Don't worry about it. Why I didn't do that, I don't know. That's the idea. He called me. So if there's any way you can get that done, don't sweat. Let someone else do it, please.
End of message.
No sé, güey.
I had a secret I swore I'd never tell. No matter how high I flew or far I fell, I told myself for a long time this information is only mine. But I got lazy and I relaxed. I started sharing little bits and surface, well, it began to creep. So now you know, what will you do? Will you stay with me or simply say we're through? 'Cause I was so scared. If you knew you'd go, what will you do now that you know? And I'd made promises to myself, always holding the hand I'd been dealt, but I let it slip